Hi guys, I'm Nolutando Duma, and I thought I should start conversations of a young black blessed woman. Because precisely today I had a few thoughts about what's happening in our country and in terms of gender based violence, and not necessarily gender based violence in terms of relationship violence in my case, but wanted to share my own experience and some of the questions that I had during this kidnapping, you know, back then in 2016. And I have not really spoken much about this experience to, people that I really, who are not close to me. But it's an experience that I feel that I've healed. And even though I'm still on my road to healing, proper healing or complete healing, it's something that I feel like I should really, really speak about because it happened to me and it's reality in our country. And there are certain things that I feel that people should understand better in terms of what I experienced and what women experience in this country. Just so you know, I have not been able to follow properly and, with my whole emotion, stories of the young women that go through pain in our country, on the news, on the newspapers, on online. You won't even find me commenting. And I think personally, it's just been about me running away from facing what I already face on a daily basis. And it's just been like, I've also been invited to comment on certain things about women who are dying, or when someone is trending that they are lost, and then I'm asked, what do I think of this? I'm usually very numb towards it because when you have been through something, it's not easy for you to just, act like it just didn't happen. And so one of the things that happened was when we had taken off and we had reached the bush that they were taking me to. And I believe after when I had returned that people had, I mean, I think on the third day, I was able to call someone and or text someone, and that's where I started trending on social media because I was lost. But in that time, when we were at this mountain in the south of Johannesburg, in fact, on the first day, the one guy said to me, I just want to ask you something. I want to ask you, why do you have a car and I can't afford to have a car? Why do you have a job when I can't have a job? Why do you look successful more than me? And I don't know what looking successful meant at that on that day, because I was just on my normal clothes, on a normal Friday evening, and I don't know what success meant according to him. So I didn't have an answer, and he was brutal in questioning me about why he was not the person that I was, as if I was the reason for him not being the successful person that he would wish to become. It was very strange. But the second thing I want to touch on, and I see people commenting on social media, everybody has different views about. So why didn't you, they ask women, why didn't you leave? Jeez, guys, why didn't you leave? Like, these women can't leave. I recently had a conversation with my grandmother, and she was like, you guys need to leave when you first hear that there's something wrong, or you were supposed to scream when you were in that hijacking, or you were supposed to run away. As a woman, naturally, I don't think, as much as I do have that push and pull, or the adrenaline within me, or the mother pamper that I can face anything. But there are situations where you feel so helpless. And that's how I felt. And the thing I wanted to touch on today, I'm sorry, I still become very emotional when I speak about this, is though the treatment that you get when you finally do come back alive. The treatment that you get from your family, that you get from your friends, the treatment that you get from the people who have never even known you. My mentor, Pastor Thomas Hadebe, once said, the thing that kills us the most when we know and we deal with people is not what they do. It is your expectations towards what you think, So you expect people to actually act a certain way. And when they don't act a certain way, then it becomes confusing, right? I had that. When I had come back, I was alive. And I remember my psychologist when I was in a psychiatric hospital. One day I will tell you about my experience of being in a psychiatric hospital just because I had gotten through this trauma. The hospital that I was first admitted into transferred me into a psychiatric hospital, and I had to live with psyche in a psyche ward. And yeah, I'll share that as the conversations go on. However, I was shocked at what people say about you if you've survived. And I remember thinking to myself that maybe, just maybe, it would have been lovely if I didn't make it. Because the rejection that comes with being a survivor, the rejection that comes with being someone who comes out of a situation, whether you survived from a man trying to mutilate you, or the experience that you get from, I know that as you South Africans, the case about a young lady who killed someone, and she claimed that it was self-defense, and this person was a musician. And everybody had their views about, well, she shouldn't have done it. And even though she had explained that it was because she thought that he was going to murder her on that day, people were like, but you're still a murderer, And I personally had such a bad experience because the people that I thought or expected to have treated me well were the very same people who moved away from me. In my personal world at that time, it was my grandmother and my brother and maybe 2 friends who stood with me. Just my family who believed me and who stood with me. My psychologist had said, do not read social media posts or comments about your disappearing. When I finally, didn't listen, I read and I found that people were saying that because I was collecting money, I found that people were saying, no, she probably was collecting money for herself. And some people who never even knew me from a bar of soap were saying there's something fishy with the story. How did she do this? How did she know that? That is the pain of being a woman in South Africa. It's it's one of 2 things. It's either you get murdered and you die, or you survive the murder, right? You survive the murder and they kill you alive. That's the most painful thing. They kill you alive because they don't believe you. They believe that you should have gotten out of that relationship, that you had the power, but yet you felt powerless. You felt powerless in that situation. And somehow, what I also don't understand is the fact that everybody questions the woman in the story. And nobody sort of stops to think that this woman probably was afraid to get out of this very own situation. Nobody stops to think that this very woman probably was helpless and hopeless and just felt like their life was over and that was it. So, as we look at gender based violence, I think because of how we grew up and how we have been brought up, we also need to maybe relook at our support system. Crazy, I will tell you. I did not go to the police station. I refused to go to the police station. And the reason why I didn't want to go to a police station when eventually they had let me go was the fact that I could not, in my sane mind, my traumatized mind that had just gotten through this traumatic experience, picture myself in a police station, because I've heard and I've read up stories of how police treat you if you are a woman and you come through and you say, I've been raped, or I've been in a hijacking, or I've been kidnapped, or he nearly killed me. So I think as we try to look at the different angles of what is going on, we should also think of what we could be fixing. I believe that our society needs a lot of fixing. I have a lot of conversations with my grandmother, and sometimes I don't blame the things that she says in terms of how a woman is supposed to act, because that's how life was when she grew up. So we've all been conditioned to think that a woman needs to dress a certain way, that a woman needs to be a certain way. And so I ask myself, if we say that rape will not be stopped by how women dress or how they laugh or how they relate to you in a club or in a party, then how do we justify the fact that the same South African men still kill or rape 2-year-old girls? We also have woken up with a story just last week of a child that was found in a basket in a bush, shoved in a bush. How do you explain how she was dressed and she's even like less than 10, and you say that women shouldn't dress a certain way? How do you explain someone who rapes a 2-year-old if it has something to do with the way we dress? How do you explain a child or a young girl who was walking somewhere and they get taken by a car, and maybe the child was coming back from school, the young girl? How do you justify that if you say, just because I have more money than you or a car than you, then I deserve to be killed? It's a messed up society we're in. And, lockdown, everybody had reflections, time to reflect. Reflect on your life, your situation, and everything that you've been through. But at the same time, during lockdown, the number of gender-based violence increased. The cases increased. So then we went down to level 3 as a country, and there was alcohol available. And another thing I thought about was, So many young women are probably sitting there and thinking, my goodness, now he was already abusing me whilst he was not even drinking. And now the alcohol is back. How much more is he going to do? And I do think that our leaders are failing to have better conversations around this, because they also know what happens behind closed doors. We are not our parents. We are the seed of our parents. I'm just trying to figure out, as a young woman in South Africa, what is it that's supposed to happen? Because the hand, the finger, always and timelessly always faces the young woman. We face rejection. Our families disown us. They call us names. Excuse me. Especially when you've survived. If you haven't survived, then they post your picture on Twitter, and then you're gone, and then they say rest in peace, and they make these beautiful posters about we stand with you. And then people go to march, and then they say we are going to stand against gender-based violence. What does that do? What does that do for us as women of this country? Does it bring back the young woman that we've lost? And then we say men need to speak, and they finally do. But they are led in those beautiful marches by the same people who abuse people in their own households. It's a mess. But more than anything, I've termed my conversations the diary of a young black blessed woman, because I want to say to the young woman who survived abuse, to the young woman who survived going through that pain, to the family who lost a loved one, a child, I want to say to you, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I'm sorry to myself, because I've also been blamed as if I asked for it, as if the pain that I went through, I'd asked for it. I'm sorry because your daughter was at the post office and she was dressed fancy because she wanted to look fancy, but they took her. I'm also sorry that she was wearing a long dress and she had made herself up that day and she never returned home. I'm sorry because our society is a pure mess. And whilst we strive to support everybody else that's going through a lot in the world, maybe we as South Africans need to strive to support and stand against what is happening to our women. Because as much as we're looking at the COVID, and all of a sudden we count numbers as if death only matters now that there's a pandemic. We forget the fact that we have been facing a pandemic. And I just feel like this should be, listed together with communicable diseases. It should be HIV. It should be gender-based violence. It should be TB. And mind you, I've stopped calling it gender-based violence. I said to myself, it's no longer gender-based violence. It's murder. You're killing our children. You are killing us. And you are there on social media commenting with everyone else. Oh, we are sorry. Oh, men must stop. But you must stop. It's you that must stop. Everybody's giving women advice that if you feel like he's doing something to you, then you need to leave. But hardly people are telling men that if you feel like this relationship's not working for you, then you need to leave her. Why? That was part 1 of the diary of a young blessed Black woman. I am revolting against gender-based murder. Can I call it as is? Gender-based murder. I'm revolting against it. Cheers, guys.